Excellent. I said that pretty short and sweet and to the point today. Well, welcome everybody again. Thank you and happy afternoon. Today's presenter is Tara Taylor, Managing Director of ADR Vantage, a premier national conflict resolution firm with over 30 years of experience, now partnering with Graduate School USA. Tara is a conflict resolution expert, longtime mediator, certified coach, and trainer who has mediated hundreds of workplace conflicts, directed numerous government and non-government mediation programs, including 2 decades of running Maryland's first statewide Commission on Civil Rights Mediation program. Drawing on her deep expertise, Tara will introduce the SCARF model, a research-based framework that explains how our brains interpret everyday workplace interactions as either threats or rewards, and how small, intentional shifts can reduce conflict, strengthen relationships, and improve outcomes. I'm pleased to hand it over to Tara, so please give her a warm welcome.
Hello, friends. So great to have you here. We are scheduled to go for an hour, and I'm going to pack in as much as possible. Just like Amanda said, we're in webinar mode, so you are not on screen. So feel free to grab your lunch, a drink, another cup of coffee. Really thrilled to have you here, and hopefully that means we'll have you walk away with some terrific information to apply right now, today, in your life and in your workplace. So I'm going to encourage everyone, if you just arrived, and thank you for all the emojis. That makes me feel like you're out there, even though I can't see you. I'm going to ask anybody that is newly arrived that hasn't done so already, drop the name of your agency or your organization into the chat. If you prefer, you can just drop your sector, federal government, nonprofit, something like that, or the industry you're in. And that gives us a really good sense of who's in the room. We've had a lot of folks already add to the chat, and we'll be using the chat throughout. I will try to keep an eye on it, but I'm also going to carve out time at the end for question and answers. So don't feel that if you don't get your question answered right away, I won't come back to you. Yeah, thanks for those folks who just added theirs in there. I love seeing all these folks, and welcome, welcome. So I'm going to have us continue using the chat. We're also going to be doing some interactive polls. So if you're new to this webinar format, yes, you're here and you're off camera, but I'm going to have a little bit of interaction. So try to pay attention to when I tell you, fill out this poll or use the chat, right? It always works better when you all are engaged and I can answer questions that you have. So here's how we're going to start. I want you to open your chat and put one word there that describes your gut reaction when you hear the word conflict. As honest as you can be, gut reaction. Go ahead and drop it in the chat. Yeah. Oh, look at that. It's blowing up. Blowing up. I love it. Oh my goodness. Yes. Tension, pain, a sigh. Yeah. Stress, peace. Ugh. Eye roll, Richard. I love it. Discomfort, arguments, uncomfortable, anxiety. Oh my goodness. Yes. Negative issue. Run. I love it, Cheryl. Yeah. It's scary, right? Angry, ego. Yikes. Headache, disagreement. Ooh, these are all excellent words. My goodness, thank you for participating. Yeah. So if the first thing that we think of are all these negatives, right, then we're in the right place to hopefully come up with some good strategies and some understanding of conflict, and maybe how you can do things slightly differently in the future. So I always love that when I do this, the words are different, right? Conflict is not just one thing, but our brains have already labeled it and already told us how we feel about it, right? You all had an immediate reaction, even though we don't know what the conflict is about, how long it's been around, nothing like that. And interestingly, and this often surprises a lot of people, 70% of workplace conflicts, almost three quarters, aren't actually about what the people think they're about, right? So in the next hour, I'm going to explain why that's true. You're going to leave with a framework that you can use in your next difficult conversation or conflict. And even though we're focused on conflict at work today, by the way, this also applies in every other corner of your life. Difficult conversations you have with family, friends, community members. So hopefully you're going to get to use it everywhere. The brain science doesn't change whether it's at work or outside of work. So whatever you're here to learn, I think you're going to walk away with better ways to motivate people, how to handle conflict better, and how to manage yourself in tough situations. So give me a thumbs up if that sounds good to you. If you don't know how to use a thumbs up, it's under the react area. Yes, yes, yes. You'll have a limited amount of emojis there and we'll use them. Terrific, terrific. All right. So I'm going to get us kicked off and kind of go over a few things slowly to make sure we are covering what you all want. All right. So we did our chat. I want to tell you about the agenda. We did a welcome and opening. I'm going to talk specifically about what motivates and threatens us and how that works in the brain. We're going to talk specifically about a tool called SCARF. If you haven't heard of it, don't worry, we'll get to it. We'll have some time for Q&A, and then I'm going to also share with you some other courses that we offer where you might want to dig deeper into this particular topic. All right. So what's interesting is our brains really tap into and label things that either threaten, right, or reward us. And our brains, of course, like the reward. So I'm going to give you later on a 5-question diagnostic you can use in any conflict. And you'll be able to apply that and learn more in those other courses if you want to. But you'll get this really nice diagnostic tool. So let me tell you a little bit about the science behind this. Traditional assumptions would tell most of us that we're motivated by external things like bonuses, what we get paid, fear of consequences, right? That's what Daniel Pink, who's a really renowned author and speaker around behavioral science, he calls it motivation 2.0, right? And yes, I can understand why people would assume that's what motivates us. But actually, research shows that this kind of approach, right, being motivated by external factors, only really works when it's for kind of routine mechanical tasks, data entry, production line work, really basic, simple tasks where there's a clear checklist. We know if we do this, then we get this pay, right? It's clear, it's repetitive work. But for the complex stuff that most of us are doing in the workplace, creative, collaborative work, that approach can actually reduce performance if we only rely on external rewards. And sometimes it actually, right, like backfires and makes people not work as well. So, what really matters for us, for most of us who are doing this complex work, right, um, apologize, I clicked ahead a little bit too much, are the intrinsic factors of recognition, knowing what's expected of you, having some control, doing meaningful work, and being treated fairly, right? Those intrinsic factors are really the stuff that motivates us. So we're going to zoom in on those 5 things I just mentioned. With something called the SCARF model, right? And this is kind of more in the interpersonal realm. So, what's happening in the brain when we feel engaged or threatened is how the SCARF model really taps in to know how we can improve in conflict situations. So, I want you to just quickly give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of the SCARF model before. I'm going to tell you about it if you haven't, but give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of the SCARF model. Ooh, no thumbs up? Super interesting. Okay. Well, I am excited that I'm going to be teaching you all about this. And you're going to get a handout that details everything that I'm talking about. And I appreciate, Akia, that you are asking about slides. We don't have the slides to offer you, but this will be recorded and you can see them all anytime you want. So don't worry, we'll make sure you get the recording of it. All right. So interestingly, none of you have heard of SCARF, so I'm going to dive into it. All right. So there's some behind this model, right? David Rock is the founder of the Neuro Leadership Institute, if none of you have ever heard about it. And he created this SCARF model after doing a lot of neuroscience research. And it shows that humans are incredibly driven by what we perceive as social threats and rewards. We don't like threats, and our brains really like rewards. So, this tells us a lot about how we can motivate ourselves and others and how we can handle conflict situations. This model, this SCARF model, each of the letters stand for something different that we're going to go through in a moment. But the model has been used and validated for more than 15 years by big companies like Microsoft and IBM, many federal agencies, and even the United Nations. So it's really well trusted and valued. And the key principle behind it is that our brain treats social threats the same way it would treat a physical threat. So, for example, our brains can interpret a fierce animal chasing us through the woods in the same way if our significant other said, "Hey, we really need to talk tonight," right? The brain goes into a threat state and our bodies and our minds are reacting, and it reduces our cognitive capacity, our creativity, our ability to communicate clearly. And all of this impacts the workplace. So the goal of using the SCARF model that I'm going to show you isn't to eliminate all discomfort around conflict. That's really impossible, but it's to understand which triggers cause threat responses in us and in the people that we work with, and try to consciously minimize them, which is going to help you reduce conflict. So, this is pretty exciting. Hopefully, you'll see it that way as well. Um, honestly, we all should be working to maximize our own reward states and those in others because it improves communication. It improves collaboration. It gives us better feedback. We respond to change more efficiently. We're more resilient. So all these benefits have been tested and tried. And in other words, you're going to be better at your job if you do this well. All right. So I quickly mentioned a threat and a reward state. Let me tell you about what I mean by threat response, right? A threat response is what happens when our bodies feel like something's a little off, right? Your body and your mind reacts before your conscious thinking even catches up. When I asked you in the chat to put a word that comes to mind for conflict, many of you had an immediate response that sort of went to the threat mode. Ooh, negative, yuck, difficult, right? All those negative words you were having a reaction before even your conscious brain really thought about the details of it. So when your body and mind reacts before your conscious thinking, right? It's happening involuntarily, it's biological, and it shows up in different ways in the workplace. So you might sweat. You might heart start to race. You might feel yucky in your stomach, right? And it shows up differently in all people. So let's do our first poll, knowing this.
I'm sorry, Tara.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Are you sharing slides? We don't see
I,
them.
oh, you don't see the slides?
No.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for telling me that. Well, no wonder you all are wondering what happened. Goodness gracious. Let me make sure that I'm sharing. Apologize, everyone. Somebody could have. Yes, I'm so sorry. All right, let's go back. Let's go back for a minute. Shige, can you see them okay? Yep, yep.
Yes.
All right, friends. Thank you so much. Boy, everybody's going to have to give me a Thursday morning. Uh, yes, yes. Some mornings are rough, right? Okay. Thank you so much. So let me just quickly skip back, right? Remember, we were talking about what really motivates us, and I said external rewards do not work nearly as well as the intrinsic rewards. And sometimes when we assume that extrinsic rewards work for people, it can backfire and actually reduce their performance, right? So, apologize. Now, I asked you if you'd heard of SCARF. Nobody had. And even if you have, you might not know all the details. So, let me just recap the science, right? David Rock, head of the Neuro Leadership Institute, has done a ton of research on this. And he developed this tool, this SCARF model, that's been validated and used by lots of organizations, including federal agencies where many of you work. And the key point for this is the brain treats a social threat in the same way it treats a physical threat, which reduces our creativity, collaboration, and focus. And so here we are at the threat response, right? That's the thing that happens before your conscious mind can catch up, right? It's biological, it's involuntary, it happens to everyone, but it does show up differently in um, in the way that we work together. So let me just quickly touch on these 5 domains, and then I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. All right. So S stands for status. It's our relative sense of importance and worth and whether we're valued by others, right? Is the work I do and who I am as a human being valued? So status is one of the domains that the SCARF model measures in us and in others, people you supervise, people you work with, and even outside of work. Certainty, the C, is about our need to predict what happens next, right? It is, but gosh, can I know what is expected of me and it's clear enough to me to be able to do it? Autonomy is our sense of control over our environment and our choices and where we put our energy. Relatedness is about our sense of connection and belonging and trust with other people. And lastly, fairness. I mean, this is really about our perception of interactions and outcomes are just and equitable, right? So I'm going to give you all of these domains and all the tips that we talk about in a handout, so you don't have to feel like you have to take a bunch of notes. But I do want to dive in just a little bit into the threat triggers in these 5 SCARF domains. And I think they'll sound familiar to you for what you've seen in the workplace. All right. So interestingly, and I'm going to make sure I have my chat open. Yep, yep. Thank you so much. So I can see that. So here's where those 5 domains play out. The first one was status, remember? So a threat response gets triggered in most people if they are publicly corrected, if their work is dismissed, if they're left out of decisions. It sort of threatens that status component. Certainty is the next one, right? If we have unclear expectations, if there's ambiguity around our role at work, or our role in our community group, wherever it is, or there's mixed messages being sent, then our sense of certainty is threatened. Autonomy is the next one, right? So when people micromanage us, if they have rigid processes that don't allow for decision making, if they have, all these red tape levels of unnecessary approvals, federal government, unfortunately, I've been there. All of that is threatening our autonomy. Social exclusion and feeling like an outsider is about relatedness, right? So if you don't get to work with others, if you're constantly being left off of email change, that can rub up against your relatedness. And fairness, right? That gets triggered when there's favoritism at work, or people aren't transparent about things, or there's a double standard for certain people at work, and that's different from you, right? Our sense of fairness gets triggered. So again, underneath almost every conflict or workplace tension, you'll find one or more of these SCARF domains being threatened, right? And conflict is more often than not a SCARF threat response that has escalated, right? Either in ourselves or in others. All right. So again, you're going to get this tip, but let me tell you a little bit more about this. So I've always appreciated the research around this because when we're in threat mode, there are physical and biological reactions that happen that impact us behaviorally, right? It's like what we can do in a threat or reward state is impacted. So evolutionarily, right? It helps us to protect from threats and detect safety or lack of safety. So threat modes, interestingly, kick in faster, they last longer, and they feel more intense than reward states or positive things, right? It's called negativity bias. And there's a lot of research around the fact that our threat mode kicks in faster than our reward mode. Also, there's a social scientist called Roy Baumeister, and he's done a ton of research on this as well. And what he figured out, if those of you who might know about him, he wrote a terrific article called "Bad is Stronger Than Good." And you can Google it. It's really interesting. But he took multiple studies and basically found that it takes roughly 5 positive interactions to outweigh one negative one in a relationship, whether that's work or not work, right? Because as we know, if we have a negative experience, it can really outweigh positive. Our negative experiences encode into our memory faster and they stick longer. They're stickier in our brains. And evolutionarily, that also made sense, right? Like our ancestors who remembered that a rustle in the bushes might be that predator coming at us, they survived longer than people who were like noticing the happy sunset on the horizon, right? Those negative things put us into threat mode. It takes a lot to outweigh them, and they stick around in our mental ledger for much longer. So in the workplace, what this means is even like a single, negative or sharply worded email can outweigh a whole week's worth of positive interactions. And people recall that particular yucky email more clearly later. So, in a threat state, how this plays out for work is it's much harder to listen, it's much harder to collaborate, think clearly, be innovative, or even see options when you're faced with a conflict or a problem if you're in this negative threat state, right? So then, what are we going to do about it, right? Is where I'm headed. So let's do a quick activity though, because I know you all weren't looking at the slides and you forgave me, hopefully, but I want to kind of take us into this next section of the workshop. All right, so here's your assignment. I think we've got quite a good group here with us. And your assignment is going to be right now, think about a song that's like your jam, the song that you might put on when you want to be in a good mood, or you're headed on vacation, or you always sing it in the car or the shower, right? Think about a song that does that for you. And I'm going to give you like 30 to 60 seconds to think about it. And then everybody that's here, right? 73 of you, we are going to let you pick that song. And then I'm going to use Zoom's random selector. If you've never seen this, it's a really cool tool where it's basically like spinning the wheel of all 73 people, right? And it's going to pick a few of you at random so that you can come off of mute. You can even come off and put you on camera if you want to, but come off of mute and we're going to ask you just to sing the chorus of the song, like super quick, right? Nothing crazy. I just want to know, like, the chorus of it. So just a few of you will be selected. So I'm going to be quiet for about 30 seconds. Pick your song because I don't know where the selector will go. All right, here's your time. Remember, you're thinking of a song that you like, put you in a good mood. I'm going to ask you not to put it in the chat because the random selector is going to have you come off and unmute you. All right. Take a deep breath. Nobody's going to have to sing. That's not a real exercise, even though I love that some of you were already thinking of your song, right? I know it was a little unfair. Hopefully, you're not going to hold it against me before you decide you don't like me anymore. I want you to just notice something for a second, right? How did you start to feel when you thought, wait, she's for real? She's actually going to do this, and I might be asked to sing. What were you starting to feel? You can drop it in the chat if you want. Panic. Yeah. Oh my gosh, the pressure. Yes, yes. Oh, anxiety, shy, anxious. Susan's like, no, no, don't pick me. Don't pick me. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh, you were ready for it. Okay. Yeah, there were some people. Absolutely. So let's take a little quick poll, right? Shige in a moment is going to populate this. Here's the question. You weren't actually going to sing, right? But you might have started to have some feelings because your brain didn't know that. Your brain was headed into the threat state. The cortisol surge is the same, right? Whether the animal's coming at you or I just tell you you might have to sing off mute. Which of these did you feel? You can select all of them that apply. Your heart started racing, you started sweating, your stomach knotted up, you were planning an excuse. Maybe somebody dropped off the call and hopefully they came back. You were frozen. Select as many of those as you want, and then Shige is going to share the results. If you've never done a poll before, you just move your cursor over to the selected boxes, and it will automatically count those votes for you. I think it gives you a little submit button. Yeah, and I'm loving reading what's in the chat too. Yes. Yes, yes. I can't sing. Yeah, yeah. So let's see the results. Woo! Pretty even split. Although many of you chose Frozen. You couldn't think of a song. Yeah, yeah. I didn't give you much time. All of a sudden, the longer I waited, it started to feel more real. Some of you were like, is that Zoom selector a real thing? Yeah, absolutely. So what I love is that all of these, right? Maybe you felt them all, maybe you felt two, three, four of them, right? Our bodies were getting ready for something that didn't feel quite right, at least for most of us, right? What you experienced was a genuine threat response for any of these that you selected. Your brain didn't distinguish between singing in a webinar and an animal coming after you, right? And this activity touched on several different domains of the SCARF model. So thank you for doing the poll. I'm going to close that out, right? I love that you all sort of felt it. And honestly, even if you felt something like you were kind of excited, that certainly happens. And what it tells us is people perceive things differently. So even in a situation where a lot of you felt all the negative stuff, scary, frozen, right? Some people felt excited. So I sort of have to remind myself, like, hey, people react differently. So my assumptions also have to check with what that assumption is, right? And how I'm going to handle a conflict situation. So let me talk a little bit about how I think colleagues experience this every day, some version of this, right? They are put on the spot in a meeting. You get called out for something that you didn't know you were responsible for, or a decision is made and a boss doesn't like your idea or your options for it, right? The trigger is smaller, but the biology is exactly the same. It's what leads us to conflict. So even when you see this maybe as a little bit of a reward, right? It really is just different responses for different people. So there is some kind of more detailed biology around this, and I think it's a little bit interesting. There was a huge poll survey done by the Gallup Q12, right? Gallup is the big workplace consulting firm, and they created this, scientifically validated research survey tool, and it was all about assessing employee engagement, right? So there were 12 questions in the survey to capture employee perceptions. And they got responses from over 25 million employees across 195 countries. And it was independently validated across all the different SCARF identities. So everybody that answered it fell into the categories that SCARF talks about, those social domains, right? And basically, what that's telling us is that these aren't preferences or generational differences or personality types. This is really about core things that motivate or threaten all of us, right? Nearly every country on earth landed on those same five things that David Rock found in his development of the SCARF model. And I think that's super powerful to know, right? They're hardwired needs. Biology is universal. SCARF works, understanding your own SCARF triggers and others, because it's how everyone's brain is built. So, in this survey, right, what they found is that clarity of expectations, the C for certainty, is described as perhaps the most basic human need. Basic human need. There were substantial gains on this item alone that correlate with productivity. So when people feel more certain about what's expected of them and how to do it, their productivity goes up by at least 5 or 10%, right? So imagine if you could take everybody on your team and improve their productivity by 10%. I know what's expected of me, so I produce more. That would be pretty magical, at least in my world, right? And what it also found is that there is zero correlation, zero significant correlation with the external stuff like compensation and bonuses being linked to employee engagement. But what did show up is that if employees feel that my opinion counts and other people see that, right? Autonomy and relatedness, that's when they significantly improve their engagement. So let's try to make this all a little more personal. Like you don't have to intend to threaten somebody for a threat response to occur, right? A quick email, a skipped invitation to something, right? An off-the-cuff comment, that's enough to shut somebody down and really limit their ability to collaborate and communicate. So as we get into this, we talked about scarf in general, right? But every brain is wired differently. A few of you were even excited to sing. So let's see which one you think you're most triggered by, because this is going to help us as we move forward. All right. So the poll here says, which scarf domain triggers the threat response most in you? I know you could probably check more than one, right? But I'm going to kind of ask you to make a single choice. Which one would really rub up against your own threat response, right? When you don't feel important or worth it or valued by others. Is it status? Is it certainty when you can't predict what's happening next and don't know what's expected of you? Is it control over your environment, right? You want to be able to make decisions, have your voice count, be in control of how you do your work. And when it's not, that really bugs you. Relatedness, right? That's about connection, belonging, and trust. Fairness. That's all about, hey, I feel like I'm being treated fairly and everybody else is being treated equitably. I see, Susan, your question here. I want to let everybody vote. Let everybody vote, and then I will certainly answer your question. Take a second, vote on your poll, and then Shige is going to share with us the responses. Oh, wow. Look at this. Look at this. Pretty even split. Looks like not everybody is voting, but that's okay. Status and autonomy really won out here, just slightly, but sense of importance and being valued and having control over your environment, right? Those are big for you all. But also I see fairness. Yeah, a sense of like, hey, everything's equitable here in the workplace. Relatedness, right? Being connected to people and being trusted to do good work and certainty, right? That ability to predict what happens next and knowing your expectations. So it's a really interesting way to think about it. And I'm going to come back to this, but everybody has triggers, right? This is normal. Everybody has triggers, and everybody probably gets triggered at some point by one of these five, and these might vary by your role. So, like if I tell you just answer this question at work, that might be slightly different than if I said answer this question at home or with your community. So, don't be stressed about that, right? I know that it differs across different roles. Susan asks, is there any connection to the formal recognition of the award or bonus separate from monetary value as far as improving perception of your opinion being mattered and valued? Yeah, Susan, it's a good question, and I don't know that I have a perfect answer for it. So basically, Susan's saying if you set money aside, is the fact that I might get public recognition or an award for the work that I do, does that make me feel more status reward, right? Rather than threatened? Does it give me like, oh, people do value my opinions and things like that? Um, the way the Gallup study was done, no, they did not find any significant, and I say significant correlation to that. But interestingly, what I would suggest and what I always tell people to do with teams is find out if it matters to the people you work with or you supervise, right? There is a way to ask, what motivates you? What are you really looking for? Do you like rewards? Do you not? I mean, awards, do you not like recognition, right? Sometimes just knowing that some people are not motivated by that at all, and others are. So it's pretty unique. All right, so I'm going to keep going, Susan, and if you have more questions, no problem. But let's put Scarf a little bit into action here. So or you answered, what you think is most triggering for you. But I want to talk about how it shows up in the brain in conflict at work. So when you identify which domain is being threatened in you and in others, you can address the real issue and not just the surface behavior, right? And getting to the real issue is how conflict really gets resolved and doesn't show up again and again and again. So I'm going to give you a quick scenario to see SCARF in action. All right, so here we go. You're going to get another poll right now, but the scenario is two colleagues disagree in a team meeting and it turns personal. Which SCARF domain is most at play? Shige, if you could populate that poll for me, thank you so much. Again, I'm going to force you to make a single choice. There certainly may be multiple ones at play, but what's the one that's most at play from your perspective, right? Two colleagues disagree in a team meeting and it starts to get personal. Take a second and vote. Do it as quickly as you can. And as soon as we get kind of a good majority, I'm going to ask Shige to share the results. Okay. So every one of them got a vote. Status got the most votes, followed by relatedness, certainty, fairness, and then one person voted for autonomy. So what's interesting is, right, all of us pick different ones, and that means our perception of what's being threatened might be off, right? Because each of you picked, different ones. So if you assume that it's status and not relatedness, or you assume that it's fairness and not certainty, right? Then the way that you handle the conflict might be very different. And that's why it's just helpful to start to understand this. We are going to give you a 5-question diagnostic tool that can help you narrow down which one it is so that you feel like you can address it. And domains like these often stack up, right? Like you don't solve all 5 at once, but you can identify 1 or 2 primary ones and then see if you can address those. That alone, just going after 1 or 2 of them can de-escalate a conflict that might have seemed intractable before. So this works again just as well at home as at work. I'm going to close this poll, right? But I want to mention to you that the one that really is the strongest, right, is interestingly the one that you all voted for, status, right? Oftentimes, remember I said public disagreement, public put downs, things like that really trigger for most people a status threat. And that alone can be something that is hard to recover from. So, public disagreement, it threatens people's sense of worth, right? Their threat system activates, their rational thinking decreases, they get more defensive, and it's compounded in a public setting, whether it's virtual or in person, right? So, one of the things that can really help with this is to acknowledge people's perspectives. So, here's the strategy for it, right? You recognize, and it doesn't mean that other things weren't there, right? Those other domains that you voted on, but this one is typically the highest one. So I'm going to work with this one. So same situation, right? They disagree in a team meeting. It threatens their self-worth. It fires their, biological system. And so here's some things you could do. You could outwardly acknowledge both perspectives, right? Not as right or wrong, but that both people have perspectives. You can maybe move the conversation to a one-on-one rather than continuing to have it in the mixed setting where everybody's listening in. And you can work really hard to separate the problem, right? The disagreement or the issue from the people who are involved in it, separating the problem from the person, right? So it might sound something like this. Let's assume, you're talking to one of the people, the colleagues who's in disagreement. I really hear what you're saying, and we see this differently. I'm hoping we can both put our concerns onto the table, hear what others have to say, and we see this as something the team has to solve together, right? That one sentence, making the disagreement about the issue, not the people who are fighting in the issue, pulls status off of the table for both of them. right? And so that, again, just pulling one domain off really helps to take the level down and help make the conflict seem as a problem to be solved, not an issue between people. So that's just one example. There's lots more, but I want to get into that diagnostic tool. So I'm going to put this up here. And again, this is going to be on your handout that I'm going to have Amanda add into the chat in just a moment, right? So when you're in or managing a conflict, right, whether you're part of it or you're managing it with employees, you would ask yourself these 5 questions. Around status, it is, does anybody here possibly feel disrespected, undervalued, or publicly diminished? If that's happening, it's telling you you have to start to address the status threat. And I'm going to give you tools to do that. For certainty, you want to ask yourself, is anybody unclear about their roles or their expectations or outcomes for this particular assignment or their job role or a project they're working on, right? Is there ambiguity and how can you fix that? Then you're going to ask about autonomy. Does somebody feel like they may have lost control or they're being controlled by me or others, right? If the answer is yes, then you know that the autonomy threat is probably real for them. Relatedness. Is there a trust or belonging relationship breakdown somewhere along the way? Either new or it's been something that's been in play for a long time, right? If the answer is yes, then you know you've got relatedness as one of those domains that's being triggered. And then lastly, fairness. Do you think anybody in the conflict perceives this process or the outcome as potentially inequitable? And that often happens a lot in the workplace for sure. Often it's because people don't know the whole picture, and sometimes you can't give them the whole picture, right? To make them see that it is fair. And so you have to do something to try to solve for this. So again, you can't solve for all of these, but you're going to try to identify one or two and address those because, again, alone, that can really help take the conflict down to de-escalate it. All right, so the SCARF reference card is in your chat. Make sure you download it right now, and I'll put it up again later to make sure that you have it, right? But this is kind of your cheat sheet, your reference notes on this particular workshop. So it gave you all the problems, right, and the questions to ask. Now I'm going to really quickly go through some of the strategies. So if you feel like somebody said their stat or somebody feels that their status is being threatened, then some simple things that you can do is use people's names, learn their names, pronounce them properly, use them when you're speaking to them, learn what their role is, what their job really involves, and learn what I'm going to call their stories, right? Who's in their family? What do they value? What are they good at, right? Trying to just have those kind of conversations are very, very helpful. Also, a really good tip, especially for managers, give specific praise. I often see leaders and managers give feedback in very broad terms. Thanks for getting that done. You did a really good job on that. Thanks for being part of the team. But it's not specific enough to lower someone's status threat. So tell them very specifically what they did. I really appreciated that you took all the data and put it in a matrix chart where people could see their return on investment, right? That's specific. And ask for input before making decisions whenever you can. People want to think that they are part of a process of decision making, even if ultimately you can't enact what they suggest. And you can tell them transparently why, but you want to get their input because it feeds your thinking and it feeds the future decision making. So those are all good things you can do. Certainty. Whenever you can set clear expectations, set them, tell people, be transparent about it, share what you know and what you don't know, but when you'll know more. So oftentimes leaders and managers stop with, look, I don't know, right? We'll get told when they tell us. That's especially true for federal agencies where there's a lot of shifting priorities, executive orders, funding, right? But you can say, look, I don't know that piece of it. As soon as I know more, I will come to you all and tell you. I would assume maybe in the next week or so, but I really don't know. Right? Don't let silence fill the gap. Give them some information and tell them when you don't know. That really helps lower people's certainty threat. Next is autonomy. This is true for all of us, supervisors or not. Instead of solving people's problems and immediately going to the fix, ask better questions instead. What's going on? What do you think about this? How do you think this happened? What have you heard about this, right? Who, what, when, where, how? Those are all open-ended questions. And as a parent of teenagers, I got to tell you, this is true, right? Because as parents, we often want to fix and immediately solve. And, we've had an experienced life. We can give them some lived experience. But asking questions really helps people feel their own self-worth and their own control and autonomy. So when decisions, push decisions to where the work happens, right? The people who are doing it, asking them to think and empowering them to have that whenever possible. Let me quickly touch on relatedness and fairness, right? Relatedness is all about informal connections, even just walking through the office or pinging somebody on Slack to say, good morning, hope you're having a good start. Asking how are you, right? I know a lot of us walk through the office or virtually and be like, how are you? And we expect fine and we hope they just say fine so we can move on, right? But people sense that. So take a second, right, to say, really, how are you? How's your week going? What's a highlight for you, right? What are you looking forward to this weekend? It works in any direction, in any level in the organization. That really helps people feel connected. And then lastly, people feel things are unfair when things aren't transparent, right? So you need to provide a rationale for decisions, even if you don't agree with them, right? And you want to ask it for others. So, how did you arrive at this decision? What led you to this? And if you're the one who's telling them about a decision, being as clear as you can really helps. And then also let your team or help your team set norms. If there's an expectation that people will respond to a Slack message within an hour, people have to be clear on that. If your team really prefers email rather than Teams messaging, let's talk about that. If there's an expectation that you respond to clients or customers or the public within a certain time and with a certain tone, be clear about that because then people start to realize, oh, this is being applied fairly to me. All right. Absolutely. Yes. And those of you who can't open the reference card, Amanda's going to make sure you get it. So you just have to drop your email into the chat. I am going to, let you look at that, answer a few questions, and then I'm going to share with you the courses that you might be interested in signing up that really kind of extend this, right? So I will pause. You can, in the chat, feel free to drop a question. And if nobody has questions, I'll maybe give you a few that have come up other times we've done this webinar. Yep, yep. So drop your email in the chat if you want the SCARF reference card emailed to you. But what questions do you have based on what you've heard so far? What questions do you have? I'm going to keep my chat popped up here. I see lots of emails. I will say, don't forget, SCARF is about understanding yourself as well as others. And I often get asked, like, what if the other person doesn't know about SCARF or they don't know they're being triggered, right? And that's true. And I would say back to that is you managing yourself and knowing what your own triggers are going to make you better at seeing them in others. And asking yourself those diagnostic questions is going to make you more prepared to deal with conflict when it comes up. Absolutely, absolutely. The SCARF card's there. It seems like it would take a lot of training to use SCARF. Well, actually, Phyllis, interestingly, once you get the concept of it, the core thing I tell myself is people perceive threats the same way socially as they do physically, right? They're having this biological reaction. So one thing is to interrupt the pacing of it and just simply take a breath and go, what's at play for people? What's maybe threatening them? That simple question to yourself is really at the core of all of this. Yeah, if you're going to train others, you do need to know maybe a little bit more about it, but this is really something anybody can apply because you realize where people get triggered, right? All of us want to feel worthy and feel connected and have clarity about expectations, right? That's how we do our best work. Any other questions? I'm looking through my questions that I got from the last time. Yeah. Any other questions? Let me see what people brought up here for me last time. And then I'm going to share some courses with you, right? I did have somebody ask, different team members are triggered by different domains. So like how do you manage all these people with different domains, right? And again, I want to go back to the fact that you can do stuff on the front end as an employee and a coworker and a manager. Asking people what matters to them really tells you about where they might get triggered, right? So, some things like setting clear expectations and being transparent, that helps out in more than one domain, right? But you might even want to take this scarf reference card and share it with your team and say, has anybody heard of this? What do you think? And a lot of people will be like, yeah, I hate it when people aren't treated fairly and there's favoritism. You're like, okay, that's a trigger for somebody, right? Yeah, Q&A, Q&A. Let me see what that says. The question is, do you have a suggested approach for how to share this information with others who could benefit? So one of my favorite ways is to go, I went to this free webinar, and actually I didn't even know about this, but somebody shared this tool and they said this applies to everybody across the globe in any role, right? The brain science has proven it. What do you all think? Like, should we bring this up at our next meeting? Could we talk about it in, a lunch and learn? Something like that. Just, real casual. I have also, Claire, shared it with my bosses. I've shared it with colleagues. I think it's just an interesting thing that you can bring up to others. Uh, Ernest says, can you elaborate on the personal use for scarf meeting outside the office? Yeah, and Ernest, I'm happy to stay afterwards with you, but imagine the same things I said that people want in the workplace, they want in their personal life. So if you expect your spouse or your partner or your kids to do something and you're not giving them clear expectations, you're not asking for their input, you're not doing the same thing that you do for yourself, then they're going to get triggered in those areas, right? They're going to feel like they don't have autonomy. They're going to feel like their relatedness is triggered. They're going to feel like their status is being threatened. Even kids, right? And older adults, if you're parenting older adults, as I am, right? So this all applies in the same way, and the diagnostic tool still works. Those questions on the reference card, does anybody possibly feel threatened in this way? Does anybody, that's going to tell you, and you can use it with anybody in your life. So if you want to stay on, I can absolutely answer more questions on that, Ernest. I want to grab this last question from Carrie and then share some of the courses. Do most individuals feel all types of scarf domains or gravitate towards certain types? Carrie, if you were in the room with me, I'd go, what do you think, Carrie? Right? And I think that my answer to this is yes and yes, right? Absolutely. Everybody feels all five of these because remember that survey that was done with 25 plus million people, these were the same five ones that kept coming up. And yes, people get triggered or feel rewarded more or less in the five, depending on the situation, depending on, how tired they are, what role they play. And that's why it's important to kind of recognize that all five can be at play at any moment, but likely one or two are rising to the surface, right? And even if you can resolve one, you're going to be better off in conflict situations. There is a recording of the course, absolutely. There's also one that I did last week on this same topic where I actually shared the slides from the beginning, and you can have that as well. So I'll make sure that Amanda shares that, and she's putting some things into the chat for you. Let me quickly move us so that I can end on time with some of the other courses. So I think Amanda shared with you, I'm a mediator and a facilitator and a coach. And ADR Vantage, the company that I work for, is partnering with Graduate School USA to release a lot of different um, courses that relate to dispute resolution, conflict resolution, mediation. We're always adding more. In fact, we're going to be adding a specific fuller one-day course on how to apply SCARF in your life and at work. So look out for that. It's coming. But other ones you might be interested in, we do a one-day manager as mediator. We use a model called Shift, and you do a lot of practice on how do you use mediation skills as a manager when you do have a vested interest in the outcome of disputes on your team. That one's it's coming regularly, but the next one is July 23rd. Also, a one-day course on how do you use AI, whichever platform, Gemini, Chat, Claude that you use to help you prepare to have difficult conversations. Actually, there's a 1 hour free webinar on that topic next Wednesday that me and my colleague, Brian Sims, are doing. And we're going to give you a sneak peek at it. But the next time the full course is being offered is July 8th. There are other dates on the website. And that's a really interesting one. It takes like all the yuck stuff about AI and warns you about it and tells you how to fix it, and then really capitalizes on the things that it can do to help you be better in difficult conversations. We also do a 2-day Art of Productive Disagreement. This is really a little more intense, deep dive into if you manage or work with people, how do you work through difficult stuff? And then there's a 4-day leading work groups that work. So if you're somebody who facilitates a task group or an ad hoc group or you're on a committee, this really teaches you from the federal government perspective, how do you lead those work groups most effectively? And then we also offer a full 7-day mediator certification course called the Professional Mediation Certificate course. I'm going to ask Amanda to drop in the link to all of the conflict resolution courses. And if you go to graduateschool.edu, there's information to help you navigate what courses you might want to take. For those of you who are federal employees, which most of you are, it looks like, I just wanted to remind you that you have access to training in a number of different ways. Graduate School USA is accredited by the Accrediting Council for Continuing Education and Training. We also have accreditation from SHRM, the Society for Human Resources Management, to issue professional development units and continuing education credits from Graduate School USA. So you can use the SF-182, right? This is like the standard training request form. And we have step-by-step instructions. Amanda, if you can drop the link from Graduate School's website for that. You can also use a GSA schedule, right? We have ADR Vantage has a GSA schedule, so does Grad School USA. And so we're already pre-approved to provide federal training. And then you can also do government purchase orders or use a credit card. You can pay for it that way. You can split the payment with your agency. Maybe you self-pay half and they pay. You can use money from one fiscal year and money from another fiscal year, right? And we do group rates. So if people in your organization are interested in this, we'll give you a deal on those things as well. So any questions, you can go to support at graduateschool.edu. I'm going to put this up here, but support at graduateschool.edu is there for questions. And you can also message me or my team at ADR Vantage at workbetter@ADR Vantage. And I'm hopeful with 3 minutes left that I've answered a lot of your questions. I will scroll back up. I see a couple of questions, but for anybody who needs to go, I'm going to let you go. Don't forget to download. You can always reach out to me through Work Better. You can also email me directly, and I will drop my email into the chat right now. And I want to thank everyone, right? My email is ttaylor@adrvantage.com. Happy to talk to you. And thank you so much for your patience and your understanding about starting off without the slides. That is not my normal MO, but we all have our days. Thank you so much for being here. Stay if you have questions, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.